So maybe, Nesam, because I'm looking directly at you, I've got your gaze. I might start with you.
Yeah, so in terms of, can I bring questions 2 and 3 together, because they were kind of about.
Sure.
So we talked about how we can make integrating the asks into the action plan into our work a reality, and also then onto some key actions required from our point of view to enable this. So they intersect a little bit, but we got some really good concrete suggestions on how we could take this work forward. So someone spoke, for example, about being able to use the messages behind the action plan in community legal education, or to inform school lawyers programs and people who might be engaging with young people in these cohorts. We also heard of the use of the action plan to support funding bids or submissions as an evidence base, and something that's really important about the evidence base that the action plan provides is that it's not just research or inquiries, but it's also the evidence base that comes from the experience of community organisations working with these young people and their families every day. We also spoke about the fact that what's really key about the action plan is that it names ending overrepresentation as a collective responsibility and a collective accountability. So thinking about that in all the work that we do. So moving from a situation of putting in an individual submission or drafting an individual report on behalf of one's organisation, to thinking about how might we collaborate with others to do something together to produce an interagency submission or an interagency report instead. And also using the action plan to shift from a focus on justice system reform and on crime prevention, which are all very much at the pointy end of the problem, but really to shift the conversation to how are we enacting and calling for policies and putting into place programs that have a focus on enabling the conditions for all young people in Victoria to thrive. So having that very positive vision that guides what we do, rather than just a focus on ameliorating the harms that are caused by justice system contact.
Yeah, fantastic.
So I'll leave it to you for a little bit, and then I've got some others as well. Options. So.
Over to you.
Are we doing question 1 and 2?
I just did question 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we had a really good discussion as well in the group. I think the first question was what was on top of mind and what came out, and a lot of it was around intersectionality, like the way it's layered and it touches on everything. The whole system approach was really great. Some of the things about how do we affect change and some of the key drivers that we need. There was a lot of talk about how the work currently is siloed, and so the need for collaboration and the need to bridge these silos. So one of the ideas coming out was a community of practice, shared resources, shared, and another theme that came out was disseminating the message. And so comms and communications and being, we are often so reactive, but also, so when are the moments that we can be reactive, but have the proactive work behind it. Yeah. So messaging guides, media, how do we use the goodwill of everybody in the room to then also push back on some of these media narratives. And so, yeah, there was some great ideas, how to frame issues. And also a really important one was towards the end there was the need for a feedback loop. Yeah. So the need for this work to not be siloed and to show to everybody in the network that these are the things that we've achieved. Yeah. Celebrating the wins, I guess. Yeah. And having that feedback loop. Yeah. I might leave it there for now.
Yeah, great. Deb, how did you go?
Yeah, good. The time went very quickly. That's for sure. So I think some headlines from our group was that I think one of the opening comments was that lots of organisations felt that they could actually see themselves in this action plan somewhere, which is exactly the
ambition very exciting
for this work as well. So I think that was really fantastic. There was also a really great reflection that in community services, so in our sector, there is a really strong sense of social responsibility. The people working in this sector are very values driven. We're here for a reason, and it is around impact and purpose and it is very values-driven work. And so one of the comments in our group is that given that we're looking at a range of different kind of sectors and systems, not just community services, but that interface with education, with health, with a range of other systems that are identified in the action plan, I hope that we actually might kind of be able to drive that, or the action plan might drive that kind of motivation and commitment in those other sectors and those other systems as well. So that was a hope that the group had, or that was expressed. Another point as well, which I think is a really positive one, is people were saying that, you know, this action plan does kind of recognise that there is a solid foundation, or foundation is probably under kind of cooking it, but there is a strong kind of body of work that organisations have been working on for years. For many people in our sector, this is their life's work, this work. And so, you know, this action plan is about kind of leveraging or capitalising on existing work, which is really great. And I think a really important kind of reminder, because I think my opening comments in our group was that this work, sometimes the things that we're working to achieve, the shifts that we're kind of trying to make, they can feel a little bit overwhelming. But Anoushka and I and other colleagues have been kind of reflecting, like, as a sector, we do have a lot of power, and so we need to be kind of minded of that, so that you know, that we are kind of building from strength. We're kind of like connecting up our existing work, as well as always kind of working to be better and to be pushing for big structural and systemic change, but grounding it in the reality of there is a lot of, you know, good work that's going on. It's about connecting some of that up in a more integrated way as well. There were some really kind of good reflections as well around you know, what is the opportunity here, and what are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves as a sector in terms of our culture, our practice, our ways of working as well. So, you know, one of the participants in our group was reflecting on, you know, are we asking ourselves, you know, the questions around, do we have the right kind of care team or model of support around this child or these children and like young people that we're working with? So the opportunity to kind of think about that in a really you know, intentional way, like internally, and then kind of lifting up and out, saying, well, do we have the right partnerships in place? And we might have the right partnerships in place, but what are our ways of working? So there was an example of, you know, positive engagement between a community sector organisation and local police about saying, you know, we've got this kind of concern about what is kind of happening in a public space over here. Let's work together in a really kind of like safe way to jointly kind of engage with children and young people. But we were reflecting that, you know, if the policemen often just did that of their own accord, there is like a power dynamic at play, a power imbalance, a range of kind of really negative, potentially like ripple effects from that. But by police actually meaningfully engaging with a community sector organisation, creating a safe way to, you know, be in that space with children and young people can be a bit of a game changer in terms of then the trajectory for that child or young person, rather than the cops just turning up to have a conversation in that space. And the fifth point as well, in terms of kind of looking ahead and how we kind of might work together to breathe life into this action plan and realise the kind of ambition with it, is that one of the participants in our group was just saying we don't often kind of come together as like subsectors to have these really intentional joined up kind of conversations, which I guess is why vcoss is so pleased to be part of this Smart Justice for Young People Coalition, and to be in allyship with others around this work around ending overrepresentation, because we're keen to play our part in helping that bringing together of people in different roles, different subsectors for, you know, the opportunity to kind of work more closely together and to be engaged in dialogue together as well as action. So thank you.
Yeah, fantastic.
Lots of similar themes in relation to support for communities practice, to learn from each other, to take deep dives on some of the themes. So to provide a bit of an opportunity to all speak together. So I guess generalising out the structure we've had in the working group, maybe making it bigger and more inclusive, and also self-reflection within organisations about what they're doing, and maybe sharing good practice when we have done that. So if we've done things that have worked to help our organisation do more, sharing templates or processes with the other groups, so they can do that as well. And someone had a great suggestion that whether we could track consultations, inquiries, opportunities for submissions onto the asks. So, for example, we could have a situation where if there was a call for submissions and ask 3 relates directly to that, we could all elevate that ask in our submissions. And then a related kind
Straight
of
to the top of the class.
Yeah. A related suggestion was whether we could have some kind of implementation tracker too. So we can track what's happening in relation to the good things as well.
Yeah. Fantastic.
No, I think everyone's said everything. I mean, I think the only like the collaboration, not being siloed, workshops, feedback loops, you know, I think these are all echoing. I think the only difference maybe in our group was this idea of being responsive, and the media and the comms piece. It was really framed in a great way as like changing hearts and minds. So it's a systems approach, changing systems, but also bringing everyone along with it. So what part does the media and the communications and the framing of it all, how does all that feed into getting these pieces of changes?
Well, actually, and that resonates. So in the criminal and civil justice policy section, there's a specific ask that talks about how we might, about engaging with the media and the role that media has in terms of helping a young Victorian or a child thrive here in Victoria, and all perpetuating and entrenching that overrepresentation. They have power, and so there's an ask that specifically seeks to address that, and that's in addition to the messaging point, but it's something worth noting and commendable to everybody here on the webinar. Now, I understand that we've got Sarah Covill from Jesuit Social Services, who was also one of the other facilitators of the breakout sessions, and we're able to Zoom her in. Is that right?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So from our group, we actually didn't get to the barriers, which is good because I think often we're very good at talking about all the barriers. I think in general, people, the feedback was positive. People talked about a sense of hope and that something like this is achievable. Positive to see a focus on reinvestment, applaud the notion of working together. Most people weren't surprised by the stats and felt that it was pretty reflective of the young people they're working with in their different parts of the service system. People were really positive about cross-sector focus and needing to work together and share knowledge resources. And I think for people, the emphasis on the word action plan was a good one because they felt that was something that would allow the work to be carried forward, and it's not just a point in time that people look at and then put on the shelf somewhere. So really positive feedback about that. In terms of what we could do, people were sort of talking about how they feel it's working in small local ways, and I guess it's about how we might duplicate some of those opportunities more broadly. People talked about having more forums like this in terms of how we could work better together and knowing that what we're doing aligns with each other, and then in turn putting that into practice. Having resources more integrated so young people aren't going out across a whole range of service sectors to get different things, and I guess the idea of place-based but more sort of integrated, that one-stop shop type approach to supporting young people. People felt it's really important to be transparent and accountable to communities, that often organisations are accountable to a government funder, but really we should actually be going back to community. Well, we should be going to community first, but then also going back to community in terms of accountability for what we're doing and how we're using those funds. So people talked about co-design of local solutions, opportunities for larger organisations to take smaller grassroots organisations under their wing and support and mentor them. Collaborative grant applications rather than individual grant applications. And people were keen on having something that was a bit easier to digest for staff in terms of the action plan. So something a little bit shorter, or some tip sheets. And then messaging for media, shifting to a strengths-based framework that speaks about community safety and the good things that are happening, and to sort of shift some of that dominant narrative. So they're probably the key points from our group.
Right, Sarah, that's fantastic. Yeah, great comments. So I think, let me just check the time. I think we're coming to a close. So I think thank you everybody for facilitating, but also thank you to everybody who spent the time and kind of thought about the kind of and contributed to the feedback sessions. We really appreciate this, and we really rich data for us to kind of really, as a working group, go back and see about how we can make some of these suggestions a reality.